guys, today for this video I thought I would tell you about why I really moved. Basically I've recorded this video a few times but I don't like any of them, so I'm trying one more time to tell you this story. I couldn't tell you about it before when I lived there because it was too dangerous. So obviously, like I said in I think a couple of videos ago now, I have moved. I left the entire city and I'm now living in a different city. But yeah, basically where I was living before, as I've said previously, it was very dangerous and it just got to a point where I literally couldn't live there anymore. I think I've said before, it's next door to a pub. I don't know what they call them in America, but here we call them pubs. And it was very loud. Most people would just think it would be loud at the weekends. It wasn't. It was loud any day of the week. Any excuse they had to be in that pub all day and all night, they would be there. So I had to deal with that. Just people drinking, shouting, driving to the pub, and then parking in our parking lot, sitting in their car doing drugs. So there's me trying to park up, just finished work, you know, trying to just get to my apartment. It's not exactly safe. But then the final straw was that one of my neighbours was causing a lot of trouble. Probably in the last few months that I'd lived there. Before that, I hadn't really heard too much from him. He'd always actually been weirdly nice to me. In the very few times that I had spoken to him, I tend to just keep to myself. But the last few months that I was living there, he just started to get really abusive with his spouse. He would drink a lot and he would have what I would call benders, where he would just be probably doing drugs, drinking a lot. I always knew when he was on these benders because he would listen to his music non-stop. And basically what happened was he'd been listening to his music all night, and thankfully my partner was with me when this happened because I don't know how I would have reacted if he wasn't, but we were fast asleep. And we just had this blood-curdling scream from her. I mean someone getting murdered type of scream. Not shocked, no. I mean witnessing something horrific or something horrific is happening to them. So we were panicking. We were like, do we go around there? Do we risk it? We don't really want to risk ourselves. So we were listening and watching, and she started screaming about him I'm trying to remember the exact words. I think it was, he's kicked the baby. And I was thinking, I'm pretty sure a baby doesn't live there, but that doesn't sound good. And I thought to myself, there is a dog living there. And if she's like me and she treats her dog like her child and she means he's kicked the dog, I can't go around there, because if I do, I will be arrested. Because I would have literally, I don't even want to say what I would have done if that had been the case. But obviously he'd done something truly horrific. So I called the police. And she did leave the apartment with the dog. But the police did turn up a little while later. I want to say 5 minutes after she left. She was getting dressed, but she was still screaming at him and shouting I can't believe you, blah, blah, blah. We couldn't really hear everything because it kept getting loud and then quiet. Anyway, the police turned up. He was arrested. So I don't fully know what happened, whether there was a baby, whether she was pregnant, I don't know, whether it was the dog, I have no idea. He was arrested though. I was freaking out about the fact that I had to call the police on him for that, because obviously he lived one door away from me in this apartment complex. So that was fun. So I was worrying about having to give evidence or something in court, but anyway, a few days went past and she was back at the apartment, so I was like, okay, that's her decision. Don't know why you would do that, but sure. And I thought, okay, well, nothing's come of it, but I'm still not going to speak to him or whatever because I don't know what horrific thing he did. And they did arrest him for it, so she clearly did press charges. Even if it wasn't for very long, she clearly did want to at the time. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going near that man. Obviously, having to share a parking lot to you Americans, with him was terrifying. Living one door away from him was also terrifying. Probably a couple of months, I want to say, passed, and there's loud music going again I'm like, oh God, here we go, another bender. It went on all day. I went to work, I came back, it was still on. I was like, okay. And then it became, I think it was like, I want to say 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday. And it was still going. So the neighbour above us had obviously had enough and shouted out of his window like, shut up, you don't need to have your music that loud. It didn't shut off. I was like, okay, here we go. And then the next thing I know, there's more shouting, but it's right outside my door, my front door, because there's a shared walkway. We've got like a little tiny yard. We'd call it a garden here, but in America, I think you guys call it a yard. It probably was a yard, literally. It wasn't very big. And then there was a walkway anyway. It was a shared walkway to each of the other apartments, like next door. They were stood right outside my gate. And they were arguing. And I was like, this isn't going to end well, because I know what he's just done, like, you know, not very long ago. I'm like, this guy is not in the right mental state. He's been drinking, he's been doing drugs, like, he's dangerous. So I was like, I'll set my camera to record in case, you know, they're right outside my door. I don't know what's going to happen. I thought, if anything, it's probably just going to be an altercation. But I was mainly gathering evidence because I wanted to move. And yeah, they were basically having an argument about the fact that his music had been going all this time. The guy was sick of it. He said, turn your music down, blah, blah, blah. And then I heard my neighbour say, just come and talk to me then. And then the guy from upstairs was like, what, with a knife in your hand? And I was like, because at this point I couldn't see my neighbour because there was a trellis. I had this massive trellis up because I was sick to death of living next door to that pub. I didn't want anyone to look at me. I wanted it all shut off. It wasn't fully shut off, but it was as shut off as I could make it. So I had a trellis, so I could see over my gate because it was quite small. The neighbour from upstairs, and I knew my other neighbour was behind my trellis. And the next thing I know, I just see this giant knife come up above my trellis, which is like 6'5" probably. So he's like, I can just see this hand, and there's a big old kitchen knife, like the biggest one you can get in the block of knives, just way up here. And then I'm like, oh my God, is he gonna like stab this guy? And he like backs up, like, what are you doing? I mean, it's bad enough that he brought like he said, with a knife in your hand, like, what are you doing? It's about music. Like, why have you come out with a knife in your hand about turning your music down? Anyway, he lifts up the lid of my trash can, wheelie bin, whatever you want to call it, because it was on the walkway. All of us used to put them there along the hedge. And yeah, he lifted up my lid and tried to put it in, I think was his idea. Then decided that's not a good idea. Lifted it up above his head again and then threw it towards his apartment on a public walkway where there's kids and other people and everybody's awake at this point. So I was like, there's also cats and animals. I was like, dude, what the hell are you doing? So I was like, well, nothing terrible happened. I know he threatened him with a knife technically, but I was like, you know, whatever. Don't really want to call the police again on this guy. It's been like a few days. My other neighbour goes upstairs. I ignore it. I get up the next day. Well, probably a couple of hours later because I was still like shook up about it, as it is. And I hear another commotion out my front and I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? So I look, but it's the police and they are looking for this knife. And I was like, oh. So I opened my door, assuming that he'd been arrested again. And I was like, are you looking for the knife? And they just looked at me and were like, yeah. I was like, well, I caught it on camera, by the way. And they were like, we need to see that now. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, he threw it down that way. Like, you're looking in the wrong spot. He threw it further down, like towards where he lives. And he's probably picked it up. It's been like 2 hours. Like, what are you doing? So anyway, it was a female police officer. She comes up to me. As she does, he comes out. They haven't arrested him. They haven't even talked to him. He comes out of his apartment and he's like, what are you doing? He didn't speak the best English in the world. I'm not sure where he came from, if I'm completely honest. But he was like, what are you doing? What are you doing here? why are you searching around? And they were like, get back in your house, get back in your house. And he was not having it. And I'm just stood there with this female police officer like, well, he's seen me talking to you now, so that's fun. And she immediately comes in, she like, not pushes me, but like, you know, urges me in. So we go into my apartment, I show her the video, and I said to her, I didn't really want him to see me with you because now he's going to know for definite that like I'm giving the evidence, because this evidence is obviously going to court. And I was like, and I have to live here. She was like, oh no, I completely understand, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And I was like, it's not going to be, is it? So she was like, you know, we can just say that we've been collected, you know, speaking to everybody in the area. He doesn't need to know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, whatever. So yeah, I gave her the video. He does get arrested again. They arrest him and they cart him off, effing and blinding. He goes into the back of the van, they disappear, and I'm like, oh, great. And they were like, oh, would you mind giving evidence? I was like, I guess I kind of have to, like, at least you can use my video. I don't physically want to be there, but you can use my video as evidence. It's nothing to do with me, it's their argument. I just want to get out. So anyway, I get a phone call and a letter saying that as part of, he's been let out, but he is going to court. He is being charged with having a bladed weapon in public, threatening behaviour, something else. As part of the terms of his probation, he's not allowed to go near me or my apartment. So he now knows for 100% sure that it was me that gave the evidence. And I was like, are you kidding me? So I called them up and I said, I'd like to make a complaint about it, because I keep having this issue with you guys, because I had another issue with a different neighbour above, not the same guy that was kicking off, it was a different guy. Funnily enough, this guy that I was making a complaint about kept starting fires in his own apartment. He had to be pulled out of them twice. He was mental, and he was having a domestic with his girlfriend, and I mean a bad one. And she was crying and it got really, really bad, and he wasn't letting her leave. So obviously I called the police about that as well. And they literally came to my door and knocked on it and said, are you the one that called up about domestic upstairs? Meanwhile, he's hanging outside of his window. I was like, you guys are not handling this very well, are you? What happened to like keeping everything anonymous and like keeping like witnesses safe? I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, I'm just trying to gather evidence so I can move out. I have to have incident numbers. So that's one of the main reasons why I was reporting all this stuff. Obviously with her, I was worried about her, and I was worried about my neighbour's girlfriend as well. Because, you know, blood-curdling scream is never a good thing. I was like, I just want to issue a complaint because you guys just keep putting me in physical danger. I don't think you quite realise where I'm having to live right now. Like, everyone around me was dangerous. There wasn't a single person in that entire area of where I was living that was safe. I wouldn't trust anyone with any of them. Like, they were all drug dealers, they were all, you know, yeah, okay, some of them had mental health issues, but they were doing serious drugs which caused serious issues. You know, they were alcoholics, people at the pub, same story. It was just horrible. The police were there constantly, like, not just because of me, like, everybody kept calling the police constantly. They were always in that area. And it was just rough. It was so rough. I don't know how I lasted there as long as it did. Because since I've moved out, I think they've gone through 2, maybe 3 people living there. Because I've been keeping tabs. And it's just, you know, it's so, the person before me only lasted for a couple of weeks. Not to mention the place was haunted. That's a different story. But like, it just was not safe for me there anymore. And I was like, you can use my evidence, but I need to get out. So and my partner needed to move as well. Well, it was a 1-bedroom actually in a shared accommodation. He just moved in there because he wasn't 100% sure if he was going to stay like working where we work and living in that city. We don't live in that city anymore. So he wasn't really that bothered when he moved in, but obviously after like a year it was a bit much. So we decided to like move in together, and we thought we're just going to move out of the city. It's a horrible city, it's so bad. But that's the real reason why I had to move. It was beyond dangerous at that point. It was just, you know, me living by myself in this little apartment where I had no room for anything, and not even safe just to go to work and come home. I couldn't even walk to the shop. The shop was like, I want to say like, not even a 2-minute walk from my front door. And I wasn't safe to even go in there. I just had so many problems. I should have known that it was rough, because literally I've probably said this before. I'm not sure if I've said it before, but like the week that I moved into that apartment, the guy above like used to be a drug dealer. I didn't know that at the time. I found out that week because he had a massive fight with someone and I could hear it happening. And then the next thing I know, I have 2 pairs of legs hanging from, like, I can see them hanging in front of my window in my living room, and I'm like, what is that? So I went out, and then the next thing I know, he's just falling into my yard, and I'm like, whoa, what is happening? And there's these 2, we call them chavs. I don't know if they're still called chavs. You know, tracksuit, baseball cap, talk like this doing it. They like think they're well cool. Those guys. They were up there, and they were hanging him out the window and just chucked him out. I was like, what are you doing? He could have landed on my dog. Like, what are you doing? And they said that he owed him money, so they kicked him out. I was like, you have a front door? Why have you just chucked him into my yard? Not to mention the fact he could have died. I don't think they cared about that. But this guy just casually got up and was like, sorry, and then just walked off. I'm surprised he could still walk, because like it was mostly concrete that he landed on. I should have known from then. It just went downhill from there, and I managed to stay there for 5 years. But I was desperately trying to get out. There's just nowhere to live in that city. And if there is places, they're ridiculously overpriced for what you're getting, like horrifically. And now we've moved out of the city and we're living like pretty much in the middle of nowhere, but it's quiet. We have like a 2-bedroom house now. Massive difference to like an apartment. So it's so much nicer. We have like a craft room, which is what I'm in right now. We use it for filming and gaming and all sorts. But like, it was just needed. It was desperately needed. But I'm a lot happier now. But yeah, I just thought that was one of the many stories that I would share with you. I might share some others. I couldn't share it before because, like I say, the police were involved. It was quite serious, so I couldn't really speak too much about it. But now that I've moved, I can talk about it. So yeah, I just thought I'd tell you about that one. More to come, I'm sure. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!